Hey the berries, welcome to another support season 13 guide, this time with Rakan. I've already covered quite a few champions this season as support, so if you're interested in those, be sure to check out the channel and look at the support guides playlist as well. If you have any questions about this guide, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll get to you as soon as possible, or ask on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry, where I stream a lot of support content. Now, going into the Rakan guide, if you've seen my guides before, we do a full rundown in around about a 30-minute video in one take. We go through everything from runes, summoners, abilities, items, skill orders, and any tips and tricks with the champion that will help increase your win rate with the champion. So with Rakan, there is one tree I want you to focus on, and that is the Guardian tree. My Rakan is maybe very slightly different than a couple of others, but in my opinion, this is going to be the best way for you to have consistent results, not only in terms of win rate, but also in terms of consistent gameplay, because there is a kind of squishier build with Glacial Augment and with a Shurilias, but we won't be using those because it's too squishy for reliable impact, particularly if you're in the lower ELOs. I think the Shurilias build is a kind of a bit of a bait. We're going to be going into a more of a tankier Rakan, where we will still be able to have great engage tools. It just won't have just a tiny bit more movement speed coming from the Shurilias. So trust me, it's a really good build. So we're going to be doing Guardian. This is a very standard Rakan rune set. With Guardian, we've got a Font of Life. We're going to be doing a lot of crowd control, and we will be buffing up our max HP, so that will allow our allies to heal a little bit more from Font of Life. Bone Plating is just a standard rune that you take in because you will be taking instances of burst damage when you do engage. Unflinching gives you some much needed tenacity to get out of crowd control. In the Domination tree, you've got Zombie Ward and Ultimate Hunter. If you are feeling like you are not able to use Zombie Ward properly, you can go into something like Ghost Porro. That's a little bit more passive. So Zombie Ward, you have to kill wards in order for a Zombie Ward to spawn, whereas with Ghost Porro, it's just when your kind of ward times out. So it's much easier to get the Ghost Porros to spawn, but Zombie Ward is overall more beneficial for your team as it generates some actual vision. Ultimate Hunter is so that you got your ultimate off cooldown as quickly as possible. That is because you will probably find that you'll use your ultimate Rakan extremely often, and this helps you get it off like once or twice in a game. I had a game recently where I was literally popping it pretty much whenever it's off cooldown. I think I ended up using my ultimate something like 13 times in one game or something insane. So that's how often you're potentially looking to have to use Rakan ultimate. These stat runes at the bottom, the ability haste, the armor, and the health, pretty standard. You're allowed to shift those around a little bit. You could do double AP if you wanted to, and then like armor rune at the end if you wanted a little bit more burst for the laning phase, but overall not a huge difference. So this is what I prefer to use in order just to be a little bit tankier for those later engages. Next, we're going to be going into the practice tool, and we're going to talk about summoners, and then we'll talk about everything else including items and abilities. So let's find Rakan, we'll lock in Rakan, and this is the standard kind of runes, runes with the Guardian, and then the summoners, Ignite, Flash. Those are the basic runes and summoners that you're going to want to be using pretty much every single game. I can't really feel like there is any other summoner alternative that you would want to run, primarily because Rakan is looking to get kills early and he has a very high kill potential early. He's definitely one of, if not the best, engaged supports to play right now in Season 13. So what we want to do is we want to get some of the gold, and the first thing that we're going to cover here is we are going to cover the items on Rakan. We're definitely going to be talking more about the tankier version of Rakan. So we're going to want to start Relic Shield. So that is the item that involves you having to last hit minions. Try and always prioritize and leaving a charge up for every single cannon minion that comes into the wave, and then use any of those extra charges on melee minions to help get your wards in as soon as possible. Relic Shield. Next, we want to go into Ionian Boots of Lucidity. We will be using Flash a lot on Rakan. These boots are relatively cheap, and also the extra ability haste will become really useful in terms of having your ulti down on a lower cooldown, and your other abilities, of course. So we're going to be taking Iron and Boots of Lucidity, and you want to rush those first. Now with the tank build, I primarily be doing Radiant Virtue. If you are finding that you're extremely struggling in lane, you can do a Locket of Iron Solari instead. The benefit of doing Radiant Virtue is that it gives you and your allies just that little bit of extra healing, which can turn the tide in some of the bigger team fights that are happening. But you can do a budget tank, and Locket is definitely a perfectly valid option of doing that. It just means that Locket, for example, you're going to need to be able to pop it for your teammates generally. So if you haven't got a lot of front line, because Rakan generally ends up at the front quite a bit initially, and that's usually when you would want to pop the Locket. That is so with the Locket, you generally be then popping it for your front line as opposed to your back line, unless you are on assassin cover duty, which is a perfectly valid option as Rakan. It just means that you won't be engaging much. You'll be definitely playing on the more defensive front. But Radiant, ideally, I'll always go into the Locket. So now that you have the Locket, you have a couple of other options. So Rakan's actually quite good at applying Grievous Wounds. So Chemtech, if they've got a lot of healing on their team, is definitely a valid option. You can also go into Redemption. That is also a valid option. You've got Thormail, you've got Anti-Heal from Thormail. It's not as good at applying the Grievous Wounds as the Chemtech, because the Chemtech will apply it whenever you do damage. So if you run over people with your ultimate, that's straight away going to apply the Grievous Wounds. Whereas Thormail is going to require the enemy people to hit you. But if you need a very high amount of armor, that could be an option to go into instead of the Chemtech. You could do Knight's Vow if you're on that assassin duty I was talking about earlier, and put that onto your squishy AD carry or your AP mid if they're doing well. You can make sure you use that to help them survive a little bit longer. But basically you have a huge amount of flexibility in terms of what you want to go. One item that I've been picking up on Rakan, which isn't really talked about a huge amount, is Abyssal Mask. Now that is also quite an expensive item at 3,000 gold, but what this item does is that it does remove enemies base resistant. You get about 21, 22 magic resist knocked off of the enemy. Once you get a bit higher in levels, you get more HP, so that also adds up to the magic resist. But basically it allows you to, so with the Abyssal Mask, you see this range, anyone inside that circle in its current state will take up to 25 magic resist will get knocked off. So if you've got like an AP heavy team, which I've had a couple of times, that can be extremely valuable on your team. Shredding off that magic resistance will make a massive improvement in your team's damage. And not only that, it's got a good chunk of magic resist as well. So if the enemy team has a little bit of magic damage, and you know your team has a decent amount of magic damage, it's a really good matchup into that, and it's not an item that many people take. So I highly recommend taking Abyssal Mask if you have a strong mid laner that is doing well. If you have a strong AD carry that's doing well, then you will just want to take one of the other options that we talked about, whether it's the Redemption, a Chemtech for an anti-heal, maybe some extra defensive properties with the Thormail. You could also potentially opt into a Zeke's, but I'm not a huge fan of Zeke's. So a standard kind of build path for me lately has been the Radiant Virtue into an Abyssal Mask. Then for your third item, as always in these support guides, you're going to want a Vigilant Wardstone. The value for that is insane. Once you hit level 13 with your support item complete, your item will convert into that Vigilant Wardstone. It only costs 1,100 gold. It counts as a legendary item, which counts towards that mythic passive, so you get an extra 100 health from buying this item. You would also get the extra ability power, the extra haste, attack damage, and bonus health. Also, any control wards that you buy will get stored into this item, so it will hold control wards for you, and also it will allow you to put an extra stealth ward on the map and another control ward for you to have a total of 6 wards on the map at one time for 1,100 gold. As a bargain, and you should be picking up every single time you're able to after you get those first 2 items on pretty much any support. Well, that is the item section kind of covered. If you manage to complete the Watchful Wardstone and you still have that final slot ready, you can buy pretty much any kind of tank flexible item that you want, whether it's Knight's Vow, the Abyssal Mask, Redemption, Thormail, or like the anti-hit, more reliable anti-heal with the Chemtech Putrefier. Zeeks, if you really kind of like that item. You really have a wide range of item choices, and if you're ever not sure, then have a look at the suggested items. Honestly, for this, it's not a huge difference in terms of what you go for the second item. It's pretty flexible, and the options are are there to be seen. Right, next we're going to be talking about the abilities. Now, Rakan is not one of the easiest champions to play. But I feel like his abilities are more daunting the first couple of times you play him, and once you do a couple of games, you're going to get used to it a lot quicker. So here we have, let's put an ally and an enemy champion. Fantastic. Right, so Rakan's passive is that every now and then he gets a little shield. That's it, really. Rakan's attacks and abilities against enemy champions also reduce the cooldown of the shield by 1 second. So if you land your Q, your W, or your ultimate, you're going to be getting that shield back a tiny bit quicker. It's not dramatic, you probably won't necessarily notice it that much when you're landing abilities, but it's basically free health, particularly for the laning phase, so that's quite nice. If you're playing with a Xayah, so an Xayah AD carry with Rakan, your recalls will be matched together. So if both of you, so say if one of you recalls, like Rakan starts recalling, and then Xayah jumps in halfway through the recall and recalls on top of me, she'll get to go and recall at the exact same time that I do. So she gets to bypass the majority of the recall, or vice versa. Xayah can do the same as well. In fact, it kind of works better when Xayah does it, because as I'll show you later, Rakan has a way to jump back to an ally. So you can actually jump back to Xayah and then recall with her at like the very last second, and you get some kind of funny reactions in old chat, like asking where the hell you went, Rakan, you went away so quickly. Next we're going to be talking about the Rakan's Q. Now, Rakan's Q isn't a massive tool outside the laning phase, but for laning phase it's pretty important that you learn how to use it properly. It's going to be one of the hardest ranged projectiles for you to land in the game. It will... Rakan's so noisy. So when you throw out your Q, it's a tiny little dot, but if you manage to land it on an enemy champion, you're going to get this healing circle around you. Any allies in this circle will get healed. And this is a really effective way of topping up your HP during laning phase. The healing, although we're level 18 right now and with only 1 point, it's 213, but that is much lower on the early levels. I think it's still around about 100, which is pretty crazy actually, considering it's at 1 point and it's an AoE circle. So if you're actually able to land these, the effective healing, Rakan actually ends up being one of the best healers in lane if you are consistently able to land this, better than some enchanters, which is kind of crazy actually. This does fall off a little bit later on into the game, but you can use this on epic monsters to heal too. So you could use this over at the, let's get a teleport here. So you can actually use this on Dragon and get the circle, and you can use that to heal up your team when you're doing the objective. It's the same for Herald and it's the same for Baron. So you can detonate that heal circle quicker if you run over to an ally, and then the allies in that circle will get healed. So one of the main annoying things is when you land a Q on Rakan and you try and run to your ally and to heal them up, and they just run away from you and you're like trying to chase after them, it can be a right pain sometimes. Rakan's next ability is his W. It's just his knock up, and it will knock up an enemy target for 1 second. So pretty simple. Also damages minions. Yeah, not the craziest thing in terms of ability description in the world. It's one of the smallest tool tip techs in the game. Straight up knock up damage. Simple. Rakan's E. Now Rakan's E is an ability that can be recast again within a set period. So you got 5 seconds after you cast this on an ally, so it shields an ally. You fly it over to the ally and you can recast it again 1 time in the next 5 seconds. So dash, dash. So basically 2 dash component. The shields do not stack on that same target. So what you can do is the shield lasts for 3 seconds. So when the shield gets knocked off or after 3 seconds, you can reshield. You've got 2 seconds to reshield them to then give them the same shield. So just do note that the shield does not stack on top of each other, and you want to kind of like delay the window between when you dashing and dash. If you want to dash on the same target twice, just try and delay it a little bit, or wait until the damage gets knocked off. Now Rakan's final ability, his ultimate, it gives him movement speed, it does damage to enemy champions, it charms them, and the first champion touched grants Rakan 150 decaying movement speed. So you hit a champion, you move a little bit faster, and you get to run away. In this case, the target dummy would be charmed and would start walking towards where Rakan is at the current time. So, how do we link up all of these abilities together? Well, a basic combo would be to W, then E out. That would be an extremely basic combo, and you'd probably be looking to do that a lot during the laning phase. One thing you can do to weave in, so you can do your W engage, you can Q, and then use the E to dash out. Oh, one thing I should probably add, by the way, with your E, if you're playing with Xayah, the range is actually further. So if you see the 2 circles around Rakan, there's a smaller one and a bigger one. The bigger one is for Xayah. So if you have Xayah on your team, you can see this because his target dummy isn't Xayah. The range is actually on the smaller end. That's why he particularly does pair well with Xayah, but he still does well with other AD carry compositions as well. So, proper combo, we're looking at doing in lane. It could be something like to surprise them. It could be, you could be at the back behind your AD carry. Enemy could be moving forward. You can do E, W, and E back for a quick emergency kind of engage and disengage. You could also use that to weave in a Q, and then E back. Just do note, if you do stand and kind of do that Q, you're kind of standing still a little bit in that animation, but if you manage to pull it off, it's a nice heal for yourself and your AD carry, and that's a really nice combo. Do note that this combo is quite expensive when you're in the laning phase. It's not something that you're necessarily going to want to do to spam often in lane. So do choose your fights often. The safest thing to do in terms of helping your AD carry is if you land those Qs and top them up that way. You can out-sustain an enemy bot lane quite efficiently doing that. Consistently doing W and then E engages will drain your mana a lot, particularly at the start of the laning phase. And because we're not going Shirley's, we won't be picking up Fairy Charm, which means we don't have an increase in mana regeneration. So you do want to be aware of your mana pool. It's not really like that much of an issue, but it's enough of an issue for me to say, like, don't just like spam W in lane every 10 whenever it's off cooldown. So basic laning combo pre-6, E, W, Q, E. Now, if you want to do this as an engage at 6, you're going to want to use your ultimate in combination. So what you can do is you can pop your ulti before you go in, because this ult duration is actually quite a long time. You got it for 4 seconds. So if we're back here and then we pop our ulti, E, W, Q, E, the enemy's charmed just before the knockup happens. So if you notice, when Rakan lands, there's a slight delay before the enemy gets knocked up. So the charm is really good at ensuring that the enemy won't be able to flash it away, and the knockup is basically guaranteed to happen. So that's ideally why you want to do the ulti first. When you're in your ultimate, you generally want to take the time to round up as many enemy champions as possible and then get the hell out after that, after you've done the knock-up or if you've already done the knock-up. So general combo would be ulti pop, W, rounding up as many enemy champions as possible and then dashing out. You're generally not going to be wanting to stay in the fight too long, and you will be waiting for a little bit for your cooldowns for your W and your Q and stuff to be coming off cooldown. Once your W is back up, you can then look to do like a small re-engage, do whatever you can, maybe work in some autos or a Q, and then look up to back up your AD carry again. If you've got your Abyssal Mask, you may want to try and stay in range of champions a little bit longer when you're doing this combination in order for your AP users to get the most effect out of the Abyssal Mask and do the most amount of damage. But a lot of this Rakan, he's doing a lot of setup, or he's supplementing an engage. So for example, say if Malphite, the big rock dude, ults in, which means he's going to dash in and then do his own knock-up with his ultimate. You can then E-dash over onto Malphite and then do your own knock-up to help his knock-up and do like a chain knock-up. If you've got your ultimate, you can interweave that as well. And the whole point is just to round up as many enemies as possible and try and get your teammates to do their own area of effect spells on that target location. If you're playing, so that's how you use that kind of stuff aggressively. You can do the same thing defensively. So he's really good also at defending squishy targets from assassins. So say for example, you don't really have anyone to follow up and engage. So say for example, it is sometimes quite a far distance in order for you to engage. The enemy team might have a couple players forward that might often look to push forward, and it will mean that you're isolated here by yourself, and that's no good. So you might need to play a bit on the defense. So you're waiting for the enemy team to engage. So enemy team engages, you just go onto your AD carry, you E, you ulti any assassins that are around, knock them up, and just do your best peeling as much as possible. It may not seem a lot in this practice tool what I'm actually doing, but when you're actually doing it in an actual game with assassins, even crowd controlling an assassin for like 1 second for example can put them in huge danger because they're that squishy, they're going in that deep, and your team will be able to turn onto them and kill them as quickly as possible. But because our crowd control is a little bit longer than 1 second, the knock-up is 1 second, but also the charm is another 1 second, which does increase as you put more points in. So we're talking about a 2 to 2.5 second crowd control where the enemy assassin can't do anything, and that's a really long time. If you think about it, a stasis from a Zhonya's is 1.5 seconds, and that's another 1 second on top of that. So if you remember how long and painful it feels like for the stasis, then it's the same amount of time as a stasis. I double checked, so it's the same amount of time as a stasis. So you remember how long that wait is for someone to come out of that stasis? It's the exact same effect here. So there's a lot of time and crowd control that you're putting down on an assassin to ensure that they die. So 2.5 seconds of crowd control is nothing to be snuffed at at all. So those are kind of like the aggressive and kind of basic combinations that you can do. You can obviously use your flash at kind of any point to kind of supplement that and gap close even more. So we could, for example, if we clear out the dummies, say the enemy is over there, and say you got a flank coming in from like a jungle that will be able to hit this location, but you need to get this engage off. So you're going to be popping your ulti, Eing, flash, and you can supplement your flash. That's a very basic way to use that. But you can kind of see like the amount of distance that you can cover. We started behind this nexus, and within about a second we managed to get over here. So you can see how incredibly powerful it is. So probably took about 1.5 seconds to get from behind the nexus to this point and do 2.5 seconds of crowd control on this enemy. So you can see how potentially painful that is. Just bear in mind, when you are going this deep, the downside is if you're not playing with a Xayah, it's going to take a little bit to get back to safety potentially. But that's why we do the tank build, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. You should be able to find a way to escape. One of the really cool things about Rakan as well, there's a lot of things to talk about his kit, so is that you can use your W over walls. It's a really good escape way, and also you can use your E over walls as well. So if we were in range, if that was a Xayah, but as you can see there, you can really get a really nice escape. So say for example, we've done an engage here and we kind of overextended just a bit too much and we're getting quite low. We can E dash over here, and in that 1 second we've managed to get caught over here and managed to find our way out. Or even in a more extreme situation, we can get even further than that. If we were really overextended, maybe we were warding, classic, support situation, you ward, being ganked by everybody, jump over the wall, E dash, and hey, within 1 second, you're at a turret. Hopefully, it's your own turret, but you get the point. You can escape really easily with Rakan. He's very slippery, and for example, say if you did get caught in this situation in a kind of oh crap moment, you pop in your ulti to charm them so they can't crowd control you to stop your dash, and then suddenly you're out of there because you've also got the movement speed as well and radiant virtues popping. So you can see how very annoying and slippery he is. And okay, you used your ultimate, but you have ultimate hunter, so your ultimate is not going to be as long as the cooldown as it used to be. So in those, it'll be ready for hopefully the next team fight that were to break out. Well, after you've been to the fountain and come back into the field, you'll only be waiting about 20 to 30 seconds for your ultimate to come off cooldown. So over there I can show you some kind of tips on how to do Rakan. We'll just briefly go over his ability order. So you have a couple of options level 1. It kind of depends on what you want to do. So if you're up against double poke and you have an AD carry that's also a poke, you might want to opt into Q level 1. Just because like if you W in, even though they're squishy, is your AD carry going to be able to follow up? And that's the question. If the answer is looking like a no, just don't be too worried if you have to start Q. It's kind of tricky at first to learn to use, but you kind of have to get up close a little bit sometimes. But if you're able to hit that Q, put it back onto your ally, you're going to be back up to HP, and so is your AD carry, and you can out sustain the enemy for sure doing that. If you feel like you can get something cheesier off, maybe you're playing with a Xayah or something really aggressive like a Draven or a Samira, but feel free to do W level 1. You can cheese in the brush and then W engage over onto an enemy and get like maybe a potential level 1 play, or by waiting in the tri brush. Rakan's really good at doing that because the base damage on the W is decent, but make sure you're only doing that with an AD carry that is really good at that like level 1 play, like Xayah, Draven, those kind of champions. Don't do this with Samira level 1. Level 2, you're generally looking to either take your W if you haven't got it already. Otherwise, usually it's your E, because if you're being more aggressive still, like level 2, let's say if you took W level 1, that means you're being aggressive in lane. That means you're going to want your E level 2 as well. So if you do engage, you can just dash back to an ally. Probably would be better to actually use the correct target dummies for this. But it would basically allow you to W in, then E back if needed if things were looking too good. But don't forget, you've got a massive delay on your E as well, so you could W in, auto hit a little bit, whack your ignite down. If things aren't looking too great anymore, you're starting to take a bit too much damage, you can just dash back to your AD carry and use that as an escape. And level 3, you've obviously got QWE. You're going to want to max your W first though. So W max, primarily because it reduces the cooldown of your W, but also it gives a nice amount of base damage. The base damage on the per point on the W is quite nice at 50. It's definitely one of the better ones that you have as your engaged supports. Does a fair amount of damage early on, and then you're going to want to be maxing your E. So the actual value of Q per point is pretty bad. So as you can see, the heal effect doesn't actually increase per level. The cooldown goes down a tiny bit per level, and the damage goes up an okay amount per level. But it's not actually increasing the health or the utility, which is unfortunate. So there's no real point actually maxing Q until you can't max anything else. So yeah, we'll be maxing Q last, and obviously you want to take your ultimate 6, 11 and 16 whenever that's available to you, because that does increase the charm duration. So yeah, W max, W, E, then Q. Hope this guy kind of helps you out. Hopefully I should kind of showcased how slippery Rakan is. Being able to dash both your W and your E over walls is super good. Just bear in mind you can only dash to allied champions. You can't dash to wards or minions. Something like Lee Sin can do that, but Rakan unfortunately cannot. I think that would be giga broken if he was able to. And other than that, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I may have missed. I think that covers everything. If you do have any questions, as always, feel free to ask in the comment section down below. If you want to ask me questions on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry, if I'm streaming, you're more than welcome to ask. Or you can join the Discord, the discord.gg/Bizzleberry. We have lots of support mains. I think we've got something like 2,000 support mains on there. So if you have any league questions or anything like that, feel free to go there and ask. Just make sure you verify your account if you do join the Discord, we do that to prevent people from like bots coming in and stuff like that. So I wish you all the best. Keep an eye out for the next support season 13 guide. I'll be uploading more in the future. And we've already covered, I think this is the 5th one I've done for this season already. We've already covered Milio, Lux, Morgana, and Thresh. I'm definitely going to be looking to cover more of the enchanters and a couple more mages like Zyra, and a couple more engagers as well like Nautilus. So all the best, take care, and see you soon for another video.